He looked at me like he already knew what I was thinking, and I didn't look away. My husband still kisses me before work, but not like he used to. These days it feels like checking a box. One on the cheek, one quick squeeze of the shoulder. Car keys, garage door, silence. We've been married 22 years. That number should mean something: longevity, wisdom, security. But in the past few years, it's come to mean something else entirely. Like dust on a bookshelf. We still laugh sometimes. We still share meals. But we don't share each other. Not really. Our conversations are mostly about groceries, bills, whether the dog ate, or if the car's due for service. He still calls me babe, but not like he used to. Now it's more of a filler word. Like oh or hey. I used to paint. Watercolors mostly. Landscapes and still lives. I haven't touched a brush in 5 years. Instead, I fill the quiet. With laundry. With errands. With online shopping carts I never check out. That's what life feels like now. Half-finished canvases. Empty carts. Quiet. It was a Tuesday morning when my husband told me he had to leave for a week. Conference in Denver. He'd mentioned it before, but I hadn't listened closely. I didn't need to. That's what our marriage had become. Bullet points. I just nodded. He was halfway packed when the doorbell rang. I was in the kitchen, wiping down a counter that didn't need cleaning. "Can you get that?" he called, zipping his suitcase. I opened the door, and there he was. Michael, my husband's best friend. His best man. His college roommate. The guy who shows up to barbecues and always brings too much wine. The guy who always knows how to fix a broken screen door. I hadn't seen him in nearly 6 months. He was taller than I remembered, or maybe just more present. "Hey," he said, hands in his jacket pockets. "Just came to see if the traveler needed a ride." There was something different about him. Less chatter. More stillness. Like he'd grown comfortable in his own silence. I stepped aside, letting him in. He nodded, a half-smile pulling at the corner of his mouth. His eyes swept over me, just for a second, not in a way that felt wrong, but in a way that felt deliberate. My husband came down the stairs. "You're a lifesaver," he said, clapping Michael on the shoulder. They left together, laughter echoing behind them. I didn't know that was the last normal moment I'd have that week. He came back that evening. Michael, not my husband. The doorbell again. Same time. Same tone. "I forgot my jacket," he said, holding up his keys. "Mind if I stepped aside. Of course. He moved differently than most men I knew. Like he didn't rush unless he had to. Like space didn't make him anxious. He found his jacket on the back of the chair. But he didn't leave right away. "You okay being alone all week?" he asked. I laughed, short and automatic. "Please. I live for silence." But then he tilted his head. "Do you?" It wasn't flirty. It wasn't invasive. It was just honest. And I didn't have an answer. He stood there, watching me the way people watch art they don't fully understand. Not judging, just observing. "You used to paint, didn't you?" I blinked. "How did you?" "You showed me, once. One summer. Something with flowers, I think." I had. Over 10 years ago. A watercolor of wildflowers I'd tucked away in a drawer. I smiled, genuinely this time. "You remember that?" "Something stick," he said. And, just like that, something in the room shifted. The air felt thicker. Not uncomfortable. Just charged. He left a few minutes later. But my mind didn't. The next morning, I opened the curtains to find him in my driveway. He was under the hood of my husband's old Jeep, the one that hadn't started in months. I stepped out in slippers and a robe. "What are you doing?" "Battery's dead," he said without looking up. "Figured I'd jump it. Give it a little life. Thought you went back home." He looked at me then, sweat clinging to his brow. "Thought I'd stick around a few days. Got some free time." The way he said it, simple, unbothered, made it sound completely innocent. But it didn't feel that way. "You didn't have to." "I wanted to," he said, tightening a bolt. Besides, someone should be around. Just in case. I didn't ask in case of what. The next 3 days passed slowly. Not boring. Not chaotic. Just slow. Michael came and went. Fixed a cabinet hinge. Replaced a flickering bulb in the garage. Watched a movie with me on the second night, some forgettable comedy I barely followed. But I remembered the way his knee brushed mine on the couch. I remembered the silence between us when the credits rolled and neither of us reached for the remote. I remembered the way he looked at me, not like a woman who'd been married for 2 decades, but like a woman. Period. On Thursday, it rained. He showed up with takeout and a bottle of wine. We didn't light candles. We didn't sit too close. We didn't flirt. Not really. But when he laughed at something I said, something silly and small, he didn't look away right after. His eyes lingered, like he was trying to memorize something he didn't think he'd see again. After dinner, I stood to wash the dishes. He stood beside me without asking. He dried each plate I handed him. Our hands brushed once, then twice. By the third time, I wasn't sure if it was on purpose. He didn't move his hand away, and neither did I. Friday night, we didn't have plans, but he showed up anyway. I wasn't surprised. I'd left the porch light on. We sat on the back deck. Wine again. The bottle from before, half finished. The wind moved around us. He didn't say much. Neither did I. But his presence filled something I hadn't realized was so hollow. I used to wonder, he said suddenly, what would have happened if I'd met you first? My breath caught. I didn't mean, he said quickly. Just, you always seemed too good for the background you got cast in. I looked at him. Really looked. And in that moment, I forgot I was supposed to feel guilty. I only felt seen. He walked me to the door later. I opened it halfway, the house behind me still and dark. He didn't lean in. He didn't touch me. But he stood too close. Close enough that I could feel his breath shift when he said, "You don't have to say anything." I know. And he reached for my hand. Just once. Just enough to let our fingers brush. He waited for me to speak. I didn't. And that silence said too much. We didn't kiss. But I swear I still feel where he almost did. The house felt colder the next morning. Maybe it was the weather. Or maybe it was the weight of what hadn't happened. Because that's the truth, nothing happened. No kiss. No embrace. No locked door, no lies. But something had shifted. I stood at the kitchen sink, same as always. Same mug, same countertop, same dog asleep in the corner. But I was different. He hadn't touched me, not really. But I still felt it. Like a sunburn from a day I didn't mean to enjoy. I touched my wrist without thinking, the one his fingers had grazed. It was nothing. And yet, it wasn't. I didn't hear from him that day. Michael. No knock. No takeout. No text. I told myself I was relieved. That the silence meant nothing had changed. But the truth was, I kept glancing at the window. Waiting. Checking my phone even though I knew he wouldn't call. I opened my old art drawer that afternoon. The one I hadn't touched in years. The brushes were dry. The paints mostly hardened. But I opened a new page anyway. I didn't paint anything. I just stared at the blank space. Funny how someone can walk into your life and make you see all the parts of yourself you'd packed away. That evening, the garage door opened. I froze. For a split second, I thought it was Michael. But it wasn't. It was my husband. He wasn't supposed to be back until Sunday. Conference ended early, he said, dropping his bags by the stairs. Flights were open. Figured I'd surprise you. He kissed my cheek. I flinched barely, just enough for me to notice. He didn't. That night in bed, I stared at the ceiling. He fell asleep fast. He always does. I could feel the warmth of him beside me, the rise and fall of his chest. But I felt alone, and worse, I didn't feel guilty about it. I felt lonely in my own skin. And the only person who'd seen that wasn't lying next to me. The next morning, Michael texted. 3 words. Simple. Glad he's back. I stared at it for 10 minutes, then deleted it. Not because I was angry, but because it hurt more than it should have. Sunday, we were invited to dinner at a neighbor's. A small gathering. Michael was there. Of course. He didn't look at me when we walked in. Didn't speak to me directly. But when I handed him a plate across the table, our fingers touched. And that was all it took. 1 second too long. One glance too careful. I felt it like lightning. And when I turned to look away, I saw my husband watching us. Not glaring. Not confused. Just watching. That night, I couldn't sleep. I got up around 2 a.m., wandered to the kitchen, poured a glass of water, and found him there, my husband, sitting at the table in the dark. I saw the way he looked at you, he said. His voice wasn't angry, just tired. I didn't respond. There was no point. He sighed. You disappeared a long time ago. I just didn't want to admit it. My hand tightened around the glass. I didn't mean for. He looked at me then. You didn't mean for him, but you meant to be seen. That landed harder than I expected, because he was right. The next morning, he packed a bag, just a weekend one. Said he needed space. Said he wasn't angry, just done pretending we were fine. He kissed my forehead before leaving, and I hated how familiar that felt. The same gesture, the same motion. But this time it meant goodbye. Michael came by 2 days later. He didn't knock, just stood on the porch until I opened the door. I heard, he said quietly. I nodded. You shouldn't be here. I know. He didn't try to come in, didn't offer comfort. He just looked at me like he had that first night, like I was something fragile and unfinished. I never wanted to break anything, he said. You didn't, I replied. It was already broken. You just turned on the light. He smiled. Sadly. That's worse, isn't it? I didn't answer. I didn't need to. A week passed. Then another. No one reached out. Not my husband. Not Michael. I sat alone in the house. Still married. Still waiting. Still hollow. Until one morning I found it. His wedding ring. Left on the edge of the bathroom sink. No note. No words. Just that small, shining circle of silence. And in that moment, I knew what came next. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just opened the back door. Let the wind move through the house like breath returning to lungs. And I whispered to no one. He left the ring on the sink. I left the rest.